Hey everybody, in this lesson we're going to jump right in and start a simple layout from scratch. It's just the tip of the InDesign iceberg, but it'll show you the basics of getting text and graphics into a document. I'm going to attempt to create a one-page newsletter in 10 minutes. So let's get started. First we'll go to New and choose Document, or you can just use the keyboard shortcut Command or Control-N. The New Document dialog pops up, and if I had saved any document presets they'd be here, but I haven't, so I'll leave that on default. The next menu is called Intent, and that refers to where your document is going to end up. Will it be printed on paper, or will it be on the web? Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to create a web page with InDesign. The web setting is used for documents that might be available to download from a website. So if you have your resume online for people to read as a PDF, for example, you'd use this setting. Notice how some of the options change based on the intent. Lastly is the digital publishing option, which is new in CS6, and this is for creating pages for various digital devices. The page size now shows settings for the iPad, iPhone, and others, but we're just making a simple one-page newsletter, so I'll leave it on print. The Facing Pages checkbox refers to documents like books or magazines that have spreads or right and left pages. For a single-page document it's not necessary, of course, but it won't hurt anything to have it turned on either. We just have the one page. Under Page Size are various presets, or you can specify your own measurements. The width is displayed in picas and the height in inches because that's how I have my preferences set up. Yours might be different. You can type in any unit. For example, I'll type in 8.5, then IN for inches, and when I tab to the next field, InDesign converts it to picas or whatever unit you have specified. So you don't have to know how many picas equals 8.5 inches. InDesign does the math for you. You can choose portrait or landscape orientation here, and then I'll choose 3 columns. The column setting refers to column guides only. It doesn't mean that you have to have 3 columns of text across the page. And in fact, you can change most of these settings later, if you change your mind. The gutter is the space between the columns, and the margin section also has to do with the guides that will be on the page. This little link icon keeps the settings uniform, and if I break the link, I can change each one independently. If I click the link back on, you can see that everything changes. I'm going to keep it at a 1/2 inch top and bottom, which equals 3 picas left and right. I'll click OK, and there's our blank one-page document with margin and column guides. Now remember I said you can always change your mind about those guides, and you do that by going up to the Layout menu to Margins and Columns. I'll change the number of columns, and you can see that they update on the screen as long as you have the Preview button checked. So nothing is set in stone when you create a new document. Okay, now let's put some pictures and words on the page. Now whether you start with images and fit the text around them, or vice versa, is a matter of personal preference and workflow. I'm going to start with a masthead image at the top of the page. The most common way to get an image onto an InDesign page is by placing it. We go to File, Place, or use the shortcut Command or Control-D. Select the image and then click Open, or simply double-click the file name. Now you see that my cursor has a little thumbnail of the image attached to it. The cursors in InDesign change slightly depending on what you're doing, so pay attention to them. You can see a tiny paintbrush icon here, which indicates that I'm placing a raster image. And by the way, if you've previously used QuarkXPress or PageMaker, you're used to drawing a picture box first, then putting an image in it. Well, InDesign is a little smarter than that. It creates the box, or frame as they call it, at the same time. Notice also that the little black triangle on the cursor changes to a hollow shape when I approach a guide. That tells me that my image will snap to the guide when placed. When I have it in the right spot, I'll just click once to place it. Now, as you can see, this image is too big. I can adjust the size of my picture frame, but that crops the image and I don't want that. If I hover over the center of the frame, you see this sort of donut thing appear, and the cursor changes to a hand. I can now click and drag the image around inside the frame. The bounds of the image are represented by the brown box. I'll move this around, but I actually want to see the entire image, so to do that, I'll fit it in the frame by going to Object, Fitting. I have 2 choices here. I can fill the frame proportionally, which means that InDesign will scale the image up or down to match the short side of the frame and center the rest. So now my frame is filled, but I still have parts of the image hanging outside the frame. So what I'll do is fit the content proportionally. So InDesign fits the image according to its longer dimension inside the frame. I can see the entire image, but now my frame is larger than the image on the top and the bottom. That doesn't really matter. The frame won't print unless it has a colored fill or stroke applied to it. But if I want the frame to be the same size as the image, I can either go back to the fitting menu, or I can access those same options here on the control bar. The icons are kind of small, so to help remember which is which, hover over until you get the tool tips. So here are the two we just tried on the left, fill and fit proportionally, and here is the fit content to frame. If I click that, the image fills the frame disproportionately and gets stretched. I don't want that, so I'll undo and choose Fit Frame to Content. Now the frame snaps to the edges and is the same size as the image. And now I'll just move the whole thing up to the top of my page with the selection tool. We get text onto the page in the same way by placing. So again, go to File, Place, and this time I'll choose a text file. The cursor displays a preview of the text, and I can just click on the page, or this time I'm going to click and drag out a 2-column wide text frame using my column guides as well guides. You'll notice that the text is in 1 column, not 2. The guides are just that. They don't force the text into columns. So I'll go up to the control bar and add a second column to my text frame. The text doesn't fill up the box, so I could drag it up to adjust and just try to guess the right height, or I can do what we did with the image and make the frame fit the text. And you'll see that it makes the frame exactly the right size to accommodate the story. You'll probably get your text from another file like that, whether it be a Word document or a plain text file, but you can always type directly into InDesign as well. Select the Type tool and drag out a text frame. Again, you don't have to draw a text frame with one tool and then switch to the Type tool to start typing in it. The Type tool does both. So I'm going to add a headline here by typing directly in the box. I want a different font for my headlines, so I'll select the text and go up to the font menu in the control bar. I'll choose Helvetica Bold, and then I'll change the point size to 36. Notice that when I'm using the selection tool, the content in the control bar changes to things having to do with manipulating objects, their size, their position, rotation, and so on. But when I choose the Type tool, the control bar changes to things having to do with editing the characters of the text, the font, the point size, the leading, all the things that you would find in a type panel. I have another story I want in the newsletter, so I'll use the Type tool and draw out a 1-column box. This is actually a redundant step, since I could have drawn the frame as I placed the text, but sometimes it helps to have the frame on the page to visualize your layout. Now I'll go to File, Place, and grab the other story. I can select the whole thing by pressing Command or Control A, and I think I want this to be in a condensed font, so as before, I'll change it in the control bar. I'll use the shortcut Command 2 to zoom in to 200% so you can see that. You may have noticed this little red plus sign on the lower right of the text frame. I'll use my Command spacebar shortcut to zoom in. That plus sign indicates that there is more text outside the frame. This is called overset text. So I can just make the text frame deeper to accommodate the overset text, and the red plus sign goes away. But let's say I want this text frame to be the same height as the other one, so I'll have to edit the text to make it fit. Right now I'm using the selection tool, but I can double-click inside a text frame to switch to the Type tool without going the toolbar to select it. Now I'll select some text and delete it. And yes, this is very weird placeholder text, I know. Okay, so let's say I want to put a little mugshot photo in this column. I'll switch to the selection tool and go back to File, Place, and find my photo. But we have a problem. The photo is now in the text frame and the text is gone. InDesign's frames can be for both pictures and for text, which is really handy most of the time, but you have to be careful. This happened because I had the text frame selected when I went to place the photo, and InDesign thought I wanted to replace the text with the picture. I'll undo that, and you can see that the cursor is still loaded with the photo ready to place it, but I'm not ready to do that just yet, so I can press the Escape key to get rid of it. So when you're in the Place dialog, look to see if Replace Item is checked. Sometimes that's what you'll want because you're placing a new photo where an old one used to be, and why go to the trouble of drawing out a new picture frame? But sometimes you don't want that, so you can uncheck it. Or you can leave it checked and just make sure that nothing is selected before placing something new. Okay, now I'll grab my photo, and this time, rather than just clicking to place it, I'm going to click and drag it to size as I'm placing. You can see that I can only drag out a frame that is in the same proportion of my photo. No matter which way I drag, the frame stays in proportion. So I'm going to line that up with the edge of the column and release. That's about the size I want, but the photo is covering up the text. So I need to go to the control bar and choose the Text Wrap button, so now the text flows around the photo. There's a whole panel devoted to fine-tuning the text wrap, but that's good for now. I need a caption for my photo, so I'll draw out a text frame with the Type tool. If I try to do that on top of another text frame, InDesign thinks I want to edit the text, so I'll drag outside of the frame to make a new one. I need the text in the story to wrap around the caption frame, so I'll switch to the Selection tool and click the text wrap icon again. Alright, my 10 minutes is up, but we've seen the basics of placing text and graphics in a document. There's much more to InDesign, of course, so in the next lesson we'll get deeper into importing text, editing text, advanced text frame options, and more. See you then.